Like with all things in Islam, the first thing you need in order to arm yourself with the ability to stand by the hijab is to be knowledgeable. Look up the verses of the Quran that command the use of hijab, and if possible, memorize them. Read their tafsir, that is their meaning and scholarly interpretations, so that you'll be able to eloquently defend your choice of observing the hijab whenever someone challenges you over it. The common belief among non-Muslims is that Muslim men impose the hijab among their women in order to keep them subjugated. But in the Holy Quran, Almighty Allah said, O Prophet, tell your wives and your daughters and the women of the believers to cover themselves with their outer garments. This is more suitable for them, that they may be recognized and not molested. And Allah is ever forgiving, most merciful. Surah Al-Ahzab, verse 59. The second step in enhancing our ability is to have the courage of our conviction. By this I mean that as Muslims, we believe in the wisdom behind the hijab and are convinced about the need to observe it. We know it's our noble right and our divinely ordained uniform, but sometimes in the face of dire circumstances, our faith might waver and some of us may feel the need to compromise. Some of us might be surprised to hear that opposition against the hijab comes not only from non-Muslims, but from fellow Muslims as well, especially close family members like husbands or parents. I am personally acquainted with 3 women whose husbands are their main obstacles to wearing the hijab. And I know of a young lady whose mother told her she was always embarrassed to move around with her because she observes the hijab and the mother doesn't. Of the 3 women whose husbands hate the hijab, one is a foreigner who reverted to Islam when she married her husband. Her husband is also a foreigner and they both live here because the man works for a foreign company. What is ironic is that the husband was born a Muslim and he encouraged her to become a Muslim. But he is so opposed to the hijab that she had to ask me for a book on hijab in order to see if she could convince him to let her use it freely. The second was a newlywed lady from a decent family in one of the northwestern states. After their marriage, her husband would insist that she shouldn't wear the hijab because it hides all her beauty. And he wanted his friends to see how lucky he was to have married a beautiful woman with long, lovely hair. The third is a friend of mine. She told me that anytime she wore the hijab, her husband wouldn't walk by her side. He simply walks ahead wherever they went, so it would look like he had nothing to do with her. And all this from people who should know better. People who should remember that the Holy Quran says, "Qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara, waquduha an-nasu wal hijara." O you who believe, ward off from yourselves and your families a fire, whose fuel is men and stones. Now you know why it takes the courage of one's conviction to stick to wearing the hijab sometimes. Now the third way we can achieve this also is to debunk all anti-hijab myths. There are certainly a number of myths going around, especially against young women, in order to get them not to observe the hijab. You know, they are often told that the hijab makes them look unattractive or old, or they won't be attractive enough to men and therefore might find it hard to get husbands. To enhance our ability to stand for the hijab, we must be ready to debunk these myths by assuring young women that 1, the hijab does not make you look ugly, but rather modest and respectable. The hijab makes people listen and concentrate on what you do or say, rather than your looks or your dressing. There are men who will only seek women in marriage who dress decently and modestly. And there is no truth in the saying that a husband will be hard to come by for a hijab wearer.